they needed someone to protect their land that they obtained, right? And that was the beginning of samurai. And it is the famous Mongolian invasion. A lot of people ask me, Shogo, who is your favorite samurai warlord during the Sengoku War period? And I always answer Tokugawa Ieyasu. Minasan konnichiwa, and welcome to Shogo's Classroom. Thank you so much, everyone. This is going to be the second video for Shogo's Classroom. Last time we did a self-introduction of myself, and this time, finally, a topic about history and culture. Finally, thank you so much for waiting, guys. Yeah. And today I was wondering about what I could do for an official classroom for talking about history and culture, but I thought if we're going to be talking about more, should I say, more details in history and such, I thought it'd be really good if I can start off when talking with the very broad topic here about the history of samurai itself. I mean, the history of Japan is quite long and it is really complicated. I mean, you might know about each section here you can see, you know, like for example, the Heian period or the Sengoku War period or the Edo period and such, but it's really difficult to understand the relationships between the periods, right? So today I'm going to be quickly running through all of samurai history, which is about 700, 800 years long in this just one classroom. Yes, I hope you can enjoy it. The details will not be included in this video, but I will be talking about that in future videos. Taking a closer look just at the Kamakura period, for example, just at the Bakumatsu period or the Sengoku period and such. So today's video will just be a really short introduction of Japanese history as a whole. Yeah, and I will be talking about all the ancient history and such too, so I hope you can enjoy. So I will get started, but before I do that, I do want to say that I have Kazu.
Hello!
And also my channel members watching me filming this live. So if you're interested in watching me film this live and also talking with me over Zoom before we get started with the filming, you can check out the channel membership through the description box. And before I start though, guys, I am not what should I say, professional in the field of history. Shogo's Classroom, I did name it Shogo's Classroom, but I want you to understand that I am also a student of history myself, and I don't know everything about the history. If there's anything that you felt is, like, if you know about another theory about all the things that I talked about, please let me know in the comments. It'd be great if we can share our knowledge and experiences that we know about Japanese history and culture. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. それでは本日も早速始めていきたいと思います。どうぞよろしくお願いします。Alright, so let's get started. First of all, the first corner here says Heian period, the birth of samurai. But before we start talking about the birth of samurai, I thought we can start talking about the history of Japan itself to understand how the samurai were born. Yep. So Japan's history, the time period start from the Jomon era. Jomon era was really ancient Japan, like BC, really far back. And also there's the Yayoi period too. Yeah. So we need to kind of understand how these two ancient eras are different. Basically, it's really easy to understand if you understand is Jomon era was the hunting and gathering era. Hunting and gathering. So the people went outside, hunted animals, went home, eat it, sleep, you know, kind of thing. And the Yayoi period, the differences between Jomon and Yayoi is that Yayoi period is the timing when agriculture started in Japan. Agriculture started. So people started growing crops, living in one place, you know, we're living together as a community, you know, making crops and saving it, eating that and such. And the big difference, because agriculture started in Japan, the big difference between Jomon and Yayoi is that war started. That's because depending on the environment you live in, how much crops you can make, how much water resources you have are different, right? So during the Jomon, really long Jomon period, it was actually very peaceful. But coming into the Yayoi period, wars started. And there were tribes and small countries began to be born in Japan from there, yes. And then, finally, there was a united government, unified administration called the Yamato administration that was created around the 4th century. Actually, finally, all the small countries came together to form a government together. Yeah, and that was the first unified government that existed in Japan. And that is actually the ancestors, basically, of the imperial family and the emperor of Japan today. And once this unified government was created, they needed to rule Japan and run Japan, right? As finally, now they have the top leader of Japan, now we need to make rules and such to control Japan. They were having a really hard time to control land and receive taxes from people. Yeah. So in the beginning, they said all of our land is now ours. We are going to be managing all the land, and the peasants and everyone, you're going to be harvesting the crops and paying taxes and everything. Yeah. And in the end, they tried to control all the land, but it didn't work out. The peasants started to run away, and people started riots and everything. Yeah, and it didn't work out. So in the end, the unified government, the Yamato administration, had to say that, okay, so the land is yours if you cultivate it yourself. Yeah, but you still have to pay taxes for us. Yeah. So basically, they handed out the land to the people who cultivated that. But when you say that, what happened is that, of course, the powerful people, of course, would be able to get more land, right? So from there, the battle between, the powerful people of getting more land started. Yeah. And when people started to take each other's land away, they needed someone to protect their land that they obtained, right? And that was the beginning of samurai. That's the reason why the aristocrats needed samurai to protect their land from other aristocrats that would try to take it, or other rich people try to take away their lands. And this is how samurai, which means originally came from a word called sabrao, which means to serve, was born. So this is the very beginning of the samurai. The Yamato administration created a rule and law for controlling all the lands. People needed someone to protect the lands, and that's the warriors, the samurai. That's how they were born. And number 3, it says there, samurai started gaining more power. Now what happened from there, during the Heian period, I'm going to go through Heian period very quickly, but basically the aristocrats had a lot of inner battles between each other, yeah. And the more they fought against each other, the more power they gave to the samurai. So eventually, samurai who were just bodyguards of their land, yeah, who were just originally just people who protected their land, because they started to give them more and more power to fight against other aristocrats, the samurais at some point started to think, why are we obeying these people and not running the country ourselves, basically? Yeah, and because especially the samurai, although they were warriors, in the very beginning of Japanese history, they were still treated almost like slaves, basically. Yeah, their classes, their status in society were very, very low. And for example, the Kanto region, which is where Tokyo is, in the past was considered a very barbaric land, and heavy taxes were actually forced on those lands. The people living in Kyoto, in the center parts of Japan, all the aristocrats were living rich lives, and the other people were basically suffering, for paying taxes and growing the crops and such. And the samurai started to say, we are now going to be the ones who are going to be ruling Japan. And the first 2 samurai clans that actually became powerful enough to rule Japan were Taira and Minamoto. The very, very famous Genpei Gassen starts from here, the war between the two samurai clans. Yep. And in the beginning, the Taira side was very strong. The very first samurai actually talked about this in the 3 Vengeful Spirits. Yep. But Taira no Masakado was the first samurai who rioted, basically, rebelled against the aristocracy, the emperor. Yep. And of course, obviously he loses, but that was the beginning of samurai fighting against the aristocracy. So the Taira family were very strong in the beginning, and Minamoto was a little bit weaker, and they lost a few times. But in the end, the very famous Minamoto no Yoritomo defeats the Taira clan and starts the first shogunate, starts the first shogunate and becomes the first shogun. And this shogunate is called the Kamakura shogunate. Yep. And the Kamakura is actually a place in Kanto, in Japan. It's actually a city in Kanto. So that's where he started his own government. And by the way, I just simply said shogun there, but shogun actually originally was a word of a samurai leader, the military leader. Yeah, that was the meaning in the beginning. But eventually from there, because the samurai became so powerful, not just as a military leader, the name is a military leader, but the shogun actually had enough power to rule Japan itself. So the Kamakura shogunate that opened in 1185 was the beginning of the samurai rule. So it was believed that samurai was born during the beginning of the Heian period, so about 200, 300 years after their birth, they started to rule Japan. And Minamoto no Yoritomo, you can remember his name, was the first shogun of Japanese history. And from there, the Kamakura shogunate did have a lot of power. They were still fighting sometimes with the aristocracy, but they have a lot of power. They start to rule Japan, but a very big incident happens, where the Kamakura shogunate loses its power, and it is the famous Mongolian invasion. The Mongolian invasion. And if you guys know a little bit about the Mongolian invasion, maybe through the game Ghost of Tsushima and such, yeah, Japan, the Kamakura Shogunate, did not lose against the war between the Mongolians directly, but it did become the reason why the Kamakura Shogunate was destroyed. And the reason is because the battle between the Mongolians at that time was very, very fierce. A lot of people died in the battles and such, and it was such a devastating battle for them. They used weapons that Japanese samurai never seen before. Their fighting, the tactics were completely different, and they actually attacked Fukuoka Prefecture, which is the most southern prefecture in Japan right now. So they had to, because Kamakura is in the Kanto region, they had to move all the way down south to fight. Yeah, and also because they were fighting a foreign threat at that time. Originally, in the past, when the shogunate, the subordinate samurai, for example, the vassals, fought for them, they would give them land that they took away from the enemies that they defeated. Yeah, but because they didn't obtain any new land through this battle, because they came from a different country, they couldn't give enough rewards to the samurai who fought against the Mongolians. So this became a reason why the Kamakura Shogunate started to lose trust from their samurai. And eventually this becomes the reason why they get destroyed. Yeah. And the Kamakura Shogunate is destroyed, and the emperor, the imperial family, gains power again a little bit, but right after it, just after a few years, another shogunate was born, and that was the Muromachi Shogunate, which is the second shogunate built by Ashikaga Takauji. So again, the first shogun that built the Kamakura Shogunate was Minamoto Yoritomo, and now the second shogunate was built by Ashikaga Takauji. And it says here, I wrote here in the Kamakura Muromachi period, number 3, the northern and southern dynasties. There was actually a time in Japanese history for about 60 years where there were 2 dynasties. There were basically 2 emperors. So after the Kamakura Shogunate was destroyed, I just said that the Kamakura Shogunate was gone, but it was because the imperial family actually destroyed them. Yeah, because right after the Kamakura Shogunate was built, the imperial family was still looking for the occasion, a chance to try to take back their powers from the shogunate. So they actually did, but the samurai were just becoming so powerful and independent at that timing, they couldn't just let the imperial family rule them again, right? Yeah. So the samurai said, no. So we fought for, some samurai fought for the imperial family, but no, we're not going to let you guys completely rule Japan. Yeah, we're going to be taking over. We're going to be building a new shogunate, and that was the Muromachi Shogunate, but the imperial family said, no, we're not going to be giving up our power again to you guys, and that's the reason why there were 2 dynasties for 60 years. So basically there was a civil war between 2 dynasties for 60 years, and finally coming into the 3rd generation of shogun of the Muromachi Shogunate. Yeah, this is when finally the wars ended and the Muromachi Shogunate, Japan itself became very peaceful. Yeah, so it took a really, really long time for them to decide who is going to be ruling Japan. But the Muromachi Shogunate, though, for a long time, it was very, very peaceful, and it was a time that culture developed. Like, for example, the No theater that I trained in, developed during the Muromachi period, but it was just exactly a timing when the cultures and such were all flourishing at that timing. However, coming into the 3rd section we have here, Sengoku period. Again, another war period comes from here. And this is because, number 1, I said here, Muromachi Shogunate loses power. But this is because the 8th shogun of the Muromachi Shogunate was a very, not a very good leader, actually. So what happened, I talked about this in the 3 evil women of Japanese history. Hinotomiko, I talked about her. But basically, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, which was the 8th shogun of the Muromachi Shogunate, when he was married to Hinotomiko, he had a wife, but he didn't have a son for a really long time. But he did need to decide who is going to be the next shogun, right? So he was saying, okay, well, I don't have a son, and no one is going to be, I don't have any ideas who's going to be the next shogun. Well, I guess I'll have my little brother be the shogun then. Yeah, and his little brother was already in training in Buddhism, but he brought him back and he said, you're going to be the next shogun. It was like, okay, well, if you say so, kind of thing. And that was decided. But then just a while after, his wife Hinotomiko, which is the 2nd evil woman of Japanese history, she suddenly gave birth to the shogun's son, basically. And then Hinotomiko said, Yoshimasa's wife said, I really want to make my son the shogun. But Yoshimasa's younger brother was like, no, it was already decided that I'm going to be the next shogun, right? You know? And basically there was a very, very big war between the younger brother, who was supposed to be the next shogun, and the new son that was suddenly born. And there was a very, very big civil war among the shogunate. And this led to the shogunate to lose its power, unfortunately, very sadly. And this was a timing when the Sengoku War era starts. So basically, looking at the Muromachi shogunate losing its power, all the powerful samurai warlords around Japan were like, okay, then I guess it's my chance this time to rule Japan. Yep. And especially this happened because the Muromachi shogunate was so peaceful, and there was a lot of trading with China, for example, importing new culture and everything flourishing, all the cultures. Economy itself was flourishing. There were so many powerful warlords growing up at that time, and they all said, I'm going to be the next leader, I'm going to be the next leader, and they all fought each other, and that was the Sengoku War period. So a lot of people get confused when you take a look at the time periods in Japan. The Muromachi period, which was when the Muromachi shogunate existed, and the Sengoku War period is actually overlapping each other. And that's because the Muromachi shogunate did exist until the 15th shogunate. The 15th shogun, yep. And that's because the 8th shogun, Yoshimasa, was the reason why the Muromachi shogunate lost his power, right? But from there until for 7 more generations, the Muromachi shogunate did exist, but it was completely losing its power. And again, the famous samurai warlords like I have here, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu, these famous warlords starts to gain power and take over Japan. The Muromachi shogunate was just there and they didn't actually have any of the power. And the 3 most famous warlords, as I just said, that you want to remember during the Sengoku War period is Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. These 3 samurai were really, really famous. I'm pretty sure you must have seen them in some kind of anime or manga or somewhere before. And you can just remember that these 3 people were really, really powerful and also famous. But in the end, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who is the 3rd samurai warlord of the 3 most famous samurai warlords of the Sengoku period, this man is finally, in the end, victorious. He fought against Toyotomi Hideyoshi in the Sekigahara, Battle of Sekigahara, and also in the Battle of Osaka, too. And in the end, he starts the 4th section here, the Edo period. And by the way, a lot of people ask me, Shogo, who is your favorite samurai warlord during the Sengoku War period? And I always answer Tokugawa Ieyasu because he is, from my point of view, he is definitely the smartest samurai warlord that ever existed in history, I would say, definitely. So you can see here, samurai, the Edo period, this is the time when the samurai completely starts ruling Japan. And the definition from here changes completely. So again, going back to the Heian period, again, the definition of samurai in the beginning, they were just bodyguards that protected the land of aristocrats, right? Yep. And then coming into the Kamakura, Sengoku war periods, around here, the definition of samurai was people who fought. Warriors, basically, with military power. And then coming into the 4th Edo period, of course, samurai did train in martial arts. And in their professions, of course, they needed at least some basic trainings in katana, and martial arts, of course, because they were samurai. But it became more of a social class in the Edo period. So the definition of samurai completely changes from here. And the absolute rule that the Tokugawa family creates from here is really, really amazing. The more you study about it, you really can't believe that one samurai family, was able to create such a perfect controlling system. And right here, I just say trade is restricted to maintain control. But this is for me to I just wrote this here for me to explain what happens later. There's all of the other things that happen. For example, they restricted religions. What you can believe and what you study and everything was restricted. They kept the samurai poor on purpose, even though they were in the highest class in society. They kept them poor so they won't start riots against the shogunate. And the shogunate kept the people who fought, the samurai clans that fought with them before the Battle of Sekigahara that Tokugawa Ieyasu fought against Toyotomi Hideyoshi, closer to the capital Edo. But the samurai warlords of the clans that did not fight together during the Sekigahara would be put farther away from the capital, so it will be harder for them to start rebellions and such, right? So the positions of where they lived were different depending on how, friendly they were originally with the Tokugawa clan. And so they just basically, you can think of everything to control perfectly a group, a country. The Tokugawa family basically did it. So it was really, really amazing. So it was really amazing that it was actually able to maintain 265 years of peace during the Edo period. So you can understand how smart Tokugawa Ieyasu was. It's really amazing. The more you study about him, the more you understand how much studying he did through history and such. And it's just really, really amazing, I would definitely say. However, the samurai history does come to an end at one point, and that is number 3 I have here, ends with the Meiji Restoration. So Japan, as I wrote in number 2 of the 4th section, the Tokugawa shogunate restricted trade with foreign countries because they didn't want foreign powers to come into Japan and take over power from the Tokugawa shogunate and such. So they restricted it a lot, but that caused Japan to be very late in a lot of the industries, for example, economy, science, and technology and such. And when the Meiji Restoration happened, why it happened is the US actually coming to Japan and forcing Japan to open its borders for trade and opening its ports for the US ships to use. Then the US at that time in the 19th century, they were actually hunting whales for their oil because they needed the oil for their lamps and for their factories and such. And they needed replenishment point. So they wanted water, they needed food, because if they come all the way over to the seas of Japan, they needed to get new water and food and such. So they wanted they wanted to use Japan's ports for that. And the US at that time brought the newest battleships and weaponry. The Japanese people with swords on their waist, they were like, oh my gosh, this is something we've never seen before, basically. And although the Tokugawa shogunate was so powerful for 265 years, they basically accepted what the US said. They opened the ports and they actually signed an unfair treaty. And when this happened, all of the other samurai clans out of Japan, they were all like, oh my gosh, we can't believe that we've trusted such a cowardly shogun for such a long time. And they started rebellions. And from there, breaking the 250 years of peace of the Edo period, a civil war starts in Japan, basically. And it was between the old shogunate and the new westernized Meiji government. And because the new westernized Meiji government got the newest weaponry from the UK at that time, they won the wars against the old shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate was gone. The Tokugawa family was kicked out of politics, basically. And Japan from there westernized, obtained all of the new laws and new systems of the Western world. And from there, the samurai class itself was completely abolished. And that is the end of the samurai history. So the Bakumatsu period, the end of the Edo period, is a really, really interesting time period to study about too. I will definitely be taking a closer look at it, but this is the history. So let me run through this very quickly. So again, the Heian period, again, in the beginning, samurai were bodyguards who protected the lands of the aristocrats, right? They needed bodyguards, they needed someone to protect their lands, so they had warriors there. But eventually aristocrats, as they were fighting with each other, how powerful their samurai were basically became how much power they had. So they started to give more weaponry, more power to the samurai. They became too powerful that they said, we are going to be ruling Japan now, basically. And they fought each other. They started the first shogunate, which is the samurai government, and the Minamoto Yoritomo started the first Kamakura shogunate. However, it was going good, but the Mongolian invasion ended up destroying the Kamakura shogunate, and then the Muromachi shogunate took power over there. But again, from the 8th shogunate of Yoshimasa, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, because he couldn't decide if he wanted his younger brother to be next shogun or his new son, the civil war basically lost all of its power of the shogunate, and the Sengoku War period started. All the samurais fought each other to gain, to basically dominate all of Japan. And after all of the stories and a lot of the famous battles, Tokugawa Ieyasu was victorious. He started the 3rd shogunate, the Edo shogunate. His family ruled Japan for 250 years peace, but the samurai and the samurai culture in Japanese history could not win against westernization, and that is how the samurais ended. So this is the whole history of samurai history in a very short amount of time explained. So everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. I was really, really nervous to film this actually. Talking about history is very difficult, especially trying to explain what if we start from the ancient times, it's like 10,000 years BC actually, so it's really, really old. And trying to explain this in one video was really difficult. And I'm pretty sure I missed out on a lot of your favorite warlords and favorite events in Japanese history and such, but definitely I will be again taking a closer look at each of the time periods. Especially I'm looking forward to, especially this Shogo's Classroom video. It's really easy for me to explain stories, so I really do want to explain about like the tales of Genji from the Heian period, maybe talk more about the first shogun, which is the first samurai, and his younger brother Yoshitsune is actually really, really famous too, and his wife, again, one of the evil women of Japanese history, is really famous too, Hojo Masako, talking about her, and more into the Sengoku War period. There's infinity stories that we can talk about in the Sengoku War period too, and the Edo period, definitely. The Bakumatsu period has a lot of drama and history too. So I'm really looking forward to maybe making one video, per 1 or 2 videos of Shogo's Classroom in each section. So I hope you can look forward to that. Yep. And again, if I missed out anything or if I said anything, probably I made a lot of mistakes as I explained everything and such. Please let me know if you found anything, or if you want to add something that'll make this class a little bit more easier to understand. All of your comments and the content of my video combined together, I want to create this Shogo's Classroom together with you. So it'd be great if you can help me out. And by the way, our goal is to achieve 2 million subscribers by January 2023 on our main channel here. So it'd be great if you can help me out by subscribing, and also all your likes and comments will help to boost my videos to new viewers. Have never seen my channel before, so it'd be great if you can help us out. Alright, so everyone, we'll be seeing you in our next Shogo's Classroom. 皆さんどうもありがとうございました. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye bye.